Are we losing touch of the sacredness of spiritual practices? Was the question that was asked in the Black Spiritual Therapist group. And I wanted to bring that over to our platform to chat with y'all about that and just see what your perspective was on it. I feel like social media has had a huge impact on, the sharing, the way that we share practices. And I think that that has either disillusioned folks or made a disconnection around, specifically for me, things like decolonization of spirituality. I feel like there isn't enough focus on specifically things like spiritual bypassing. So, an example of that would be love and lighting everything, right? And not acknowledging shadow work. Also, the power of anger. There feels like a minimization. I mentioned a few different talking points in that last video, but I wanted to just circle back to the decolonizing part. I feel like there is this push or this denial of consistently being a student related to whatever your spiritual practices are. I feel like there are a lot of experts, and there isn't that want to teach, and there isn't a lot of sharing about personal practices, related to continuous learning, related to how they're decolonizing their own practices. An interesting kind of intersection to that would be I went to a colorism conference a few weeks ago, and there wasn't a lot of talk from the experts, the folks that are writing about colorism, on what their own practices were related to colorism, undoing colorism, dismantling it, decolonizing it. So there was a lot of gaps. Something else that I've seen is like tarot reader certifications, and this question about, are we losing the sacredness of spiritual practices? Prior to the pandemic, folks would be in community, to learn the tarot. You can definitely like energetically read tarot. And I saw that the Jungian platform has like a tarot reader certification. So I think with this inclusion of credentialing certain like spiritual practices or tools, that has kind of shifted, I would say, some aspect of the sacredness about certain spiritual practices. I would love, some insight, some reflections about that. Have y'all seen these kind of certifications? What do you think about that? Would you attend something like that? There's this dynamic that's created where, you see that someone has been reading tarot for 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, 20 years, and then you have a reader that's advertising, that they have a certification in tarot reading. What kind of power dynamic does that create? And maybe that's not the right question. Maybe it's not a power dynamic. Maybe it's more about like trust, who do you trust based on that? So I think that's an interesting kind of conversation to keep talking about, especially as more like mental health professionals shift into providing those type of services, because our careers, our professions are so heavily credentialed. What does that mean related to spirituality?